Now, we've seen that Carrington's going to have a £50 million refurbishment. Some surprise news for fans. Do you think that is a good sign that Sir Jim Ratcliffe, Keith, is thinking long-term for the club?
Well, I don't know if it's really thinking long-term as much as catching up to where they should be. Really, that's about where I think it is. I mean, Carrington has been a bit of a disgrace, and it's been not really a secret in football for a long time that it really hasn't kept pace. The new training grounds at Spurs, at Villa, even Finch Farm at Everton, are way above Carrington in terms of quality and design. The new players, really demand much greater facilities. That's their place of work, Monday to Friday, basically. And so, there've got to be things added. I mean, I see Villa are putting in a 40-suite hotel in the training ground. All these sort of things are required at the top level of the Premier League these days. And so I don't think 50 million, to upgrade Carrington is anything more than just catching up to where they should be. There was always talk about a new training ground at different areas around there. I think that may have been a step too far. Carrington seems to be a good location, although it's often difficult to get to for the players. I think I've seen a lot of photographs of players in their expensive cars stuck by the the gutter and the pavement occasionally after a few accidents. But let's see. I think if they do it right, it'll give it a new breath of fresh air, and there'll be no complaints. And that's, I think, part of the problem is that there have been excuses with the facilities at Carrington that players have bought into and managers have bought into as well. So that takes away that potential complaint.
And what does it mean, Keith, for Old Trafford generally? Do you think that this is sort of Sir Jim Ratcliffe's way of turning the attention off Old Trafford towards Carrington? Or actually, do you think they're two separate issues entirely?
No, it's just one of many boxes that he has to tick. And certainly the Old Trafford one is the big one that, in terms of facilities, that won't go away until Seb Coe and his committee have finished their deliberations. And, if Old Trafford, it has to be fixed if they're going to stay there. And it's going to require some serious surgery because the Glazers have let it go in an abysmal fashion. And that's something that they should always be held against them for the way they've handled their facilities. But no, it's just one of the boxes. He's got about, as far as I can see, about 20 boxes that have to be ticked. And Carrington is just one of them. And 50 million is, a lot. If every tick costs 50 million, it's going to be a lot of work to go yet, a lot of money.
You mentioned earlier, Keith, about sort of Sir Jim Ratcliffe's way of handling the Jared Branthwaite situation. Can you sort of go into that more, please, and explain your sort of disappointment about his handling of the deal potentially?
Well, I think there's a pretty fair consensus in not only the media, the pundits, etc., but football in general, that Branthwaite is a young, very talented player. He was picked for the England squad, didn't make it to the final cut. But nevertheless, we've seen some of the transfers that even United themselves have bought recently. And to put him at 70 million at his age is certainly nothing ridiculous. I think they came in at 35 plus another 8 with add-ons. Now, obviously, what they were thinking, and by the way, I've been involved in about 200 different negotiations and transfers over the time that have completed. And as they say that for every transfer you do as a chief executive, there's probably 5 that don't happen. So that probably means I've been involved in maybe up to 100 to 150 different transfers. So I understand this situation very, very well. So they probably come in thinking that there's a PSR situation at Everton and there's a desperation to sell. And they're hoping that there's no other way around this for Everton. Now, of course, it will come for Everton in terms of can they sell Onana, can they sell Dominic Calvert-Lewin, other players, and because I think they'd rather not sell Branthwaite. But certainly what they've done is they've managed to harden Everton's resolve coming in with such a ridiculous offer. And again, it's a bit like the Dan Ashworth situation that we've talked about with Jim Ratcliffe. He should have got in the room and negotiated that and had Dan Ashworth on board to handle all these transfers during this season. It's pointless having a director of football like Dan Ashworth if you can't use him right now in the off-season, in the transfer window. So why didn't they get into the room with Everton and say, look, we're not going to be silly about this. We're going to give you a decent sum. We know the player's worth more. We may not get to your valuation of 70 plus add-ons, but look, we're going to get to 50, 55, 60. Then I think you might have seen some movement from Everton, but all they've done is harden Everton's resolve. And in a negotiation like this, it's just not a smart way to handle it. I've always found that you've got to really understand and put yourself in the other person's shoes in terms of the negotiation if it's going to be successful. you don't be stupid, obviously, and you try and save money wherever you can, but you've also got to be realistic and you've got to respect people. And when you don't respect them, then negotiations tend to go wrong. I don't know whether it's the sort of the newness of Ratcliffe coming to this situation, and it seems to me he's trying to impose a sort of we're not Man United, then we're not paying a tax anymore. We're not paying the Man United tax, is what I've heard people say. And we're not going to be taken as mugs. Well, I'm afraid you're not being taken as mugs. There's a certain value for a player right now, and you've got to understand that's what you've got to pay. And just by saying you don't want to pay it isn't going to make it any different. And so I think there's a lot of signs that I've seen recently that he's handling things very badly. And I'm going to be coming back to this on many weeks as we go forward, and with the Jim Ratcliffe watch list, because I think he's somebody that is not showing the skills that I expected him to show. And I just think he's being very badly advised at the moment, is all I can come to the conclusion. But certainly the way that they've handled this particular bidding and the offers for Branthwaite doesn't give me any encouragement. And I think they've handled it very, very badly. And I think most of football would agree.
And Keith, if we sort of delve into that even more, then what will that mean for the rest of the summer, do you think, with their transfer plans? And actually, given, say, the resolve that Everton showed with Branthwaite, how could that then affect their deals? Do you think they are more likely to say, if they were to go back in for Branthwaite, they wouldn't lowball Everton in the same way?
Well, in terms of what they've got to go forward for with other deals, as I say, without the linchpin of Dan Ashworth, who they made all this public hoo-ha about and wanted to get him away, and he's still on gardening leave. And yet you're right in the thick of it right now. And this is the time when all these deals are being done, and you haven't got your main guy there. I mean, that just, to me, still is mind-boggling. I think there's a difference between Man United wanted to pay 3 million to Newcastle, and Newcastle wanted 15. Not the biggest sums in the world for Premier League football. So, a gap of 12 million. There must have been a way to have got to 10 plus 5, or some other way to have broken this down in terms of a deadlock. But he's your key player. And so, therefore, that brings into question what is happening in terms of who's deciding on these big decisions going forward. And is there a cohesive strategy for the summer of what to do with the squad? So that's the big question. And who is making those decisions? And you've got to worry if it is somebody like Dave Brailsford with Jim Ratcliffe making decisions. There's obviously a bit of a vacuum of power in there with such a key decision. So I don't know what it means for them going forward, but they certainly haven't made a great start, that's for sure.
You've just watched a segment from Football Insider's brand new podcast, The Inside Track, with me, Lewis Pearce, alongside the guests on the show. Thanks very much for tuning in. Please do give the video a like, comment your thoughts on the topic, and feel free to share on your social media pages. If you want to listen to the full podcast episode, click the link in the description below. Keep your eyes peeled for plenty more content and exclusives here on The Inside Track.